Good morning, Alex. We're absolutely delighted to have you here on Conversations at SC. You've led a very interesting life, and firstly, congratulations on your book, The
Thank
Naked
you.
CEO. I think it's a fantastic book. It's really a great pathfinder for people who are embarking on their careers, and a very apt reminder for those of us who are on the journey already. So, congratulations on that. I think you saved many parents a very difficult time if they get this book and give it to their kids.
Thanks, Eugene. And look, it's very kind of you to have me on this program. And the book is about building leadership principles in young people. And we're both parents. And if you can add that little additional value, and I'm a former teacher, so for me, it's very close to my heart.
Really interesting. I mean, I read the book, and I've talked to you before. You've had many adventures in your life, and certainly I wish the program were a bit longer, because then we could have you share more with us. But because time is quite limited, I'd really like to get you to share some views and some thoughts on leadership.
Sure.
And certainly what you've learned in life. One of the things you talk about is dreaming big and achieving bigger things. And in your book, I know you like cars, particularly orange Datsuns, and you've said in your book, how some people drive by with the windows rolled up and the doors locked. Actually quite a worry, because we do have many people like that in the world and in every organization. We wish they could do more. But really, these are people who are not very keen on driving a convertible with the wind in their faces. What would you say to people like that?
Yeah, and look, I made that comment because I taught for many years. I taught probably 30,000 young people at universities. And what you see in youth is an unawareness of their own potential. And I don't think that changes throughout people's lives. And they reach a comfort point, and sometimes they just stop, and they just get used to that comfort point, and they build a life around it. So I'm very keen on being, if you like, philosophically that person who prods you and says, you've got more than that. And I think it's really important as a parent, as a leader, to encourage people to think about more that they can achieve. And I think if you build a culture around that, you can convince people to stretch themselves and take a chance.
What if people aren't interested? I mean, the other thing you talked about in your book is the myth of the work-life balance.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because central banks today target inflation rates, and some people do target a work-life balance ratio. And it's something that's quite ingrained in them. They believe it's something numerical. Qualitative aspects don't come into play. Do you think that targeting a work-life balance ratio doesn't work, and why doesn't it?
Look, I think the symmetry that seems to suggest that somehow 50% of your life's this and 50% of your life's that doesn't make sense to me. And I think your journey of life is around trying to find your passion, whatever that is. And generally, if you find your passion, you will never have balance in a symmetrical sense. So I'm very keen, and in spite of the fact that some people are more hard to convince than others, I'm very keen amongst my family, amongst my work colleagues, to always say, tell me that you're here because you've made a choice. Tell me you're here because you're passionate about what you're doing. Because if you're not, I'm going to keep asking you what that is, and I'm going to help you get there. It's a really important thing for me, because I was lucky enough to find it. And when you find it, I think it does give you superhuman energy. And when you see people much smarter than you, and in my case that's very often, I'm amazed at how little they've achieved with the skills they've got. And I just keep feeling that it's part of my journey to help others find it.
So we are talking about zombie co-workers here, and perhaps you can share with us a particular experience you had in saving one of these zombies.
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, it's about engaging people. And if I said to you, tell me about your favourite teacher at school, you'd be able to tell me who it was, what class you were in, and why they were special. And generally it was because they bothered to talk to you. So if I find someone who's particularly talented and particularly lazy or not engaged, I just can't help myself. And I'll call them in, and I'll start to build a relationship. I'll start to talk to them and show an interest. And I think if you show an interest in people, particularly those that are not engaged, generally it works. Generally it makes them think about things, and they know someone cares about their future. Trouble is, today we've got such large organisations, such a mass population in the world, it's so much harder to be personal. But I think if you personalise, if you give them a moment, if you let them talk to you, if you show an interest, it's stunning what that can do for people. So you don't win all the time, Eugene, on anything, but I think if people genuinely know you're keen to help them, they tend to rise to that occasion and want to work with you. And that's the start of, I think, what's great for them and great for you.
Maybe come back a bit to what you said about you don't win all the time. Well, I think no one wins all the time, but we learn from occasions where we've lost. Would you share with us an occasion where you've not won? I won't say you've lost, but you've not won. And how would you have played it differently now with hindsight?
Yeah, look, I look back and I think most of the time that was when I was a lot younger and much less aware than I am now. I say wisdom is a collection of experiences. So it doesn't always mean age, it means what you've exposed yourself to in life. In my earlier years, I had very little sense of how I impacted people. So I presumed that the way I present to you now meant that you saw me exactly that way. But often in life, how you perceive yourself and how others perceive yourself is very different. As I've gotten older and smarter by many, many mistakes, I'm much better able to understand my impact on you as I perceive myself. So probably my greatest mistakes were around not understanding my impact on people. And when you start to win that battle, things get much better. But I guess the one thing that I always am remorseful about is if I lose a staff member to another organisation and they'll say to me, look, I loved being here, but I didn't see the growth potential, so I've had to go somewhere else. So I always make a point of spending time with them and saying, if there's ways in which I can help you in that role, let me know. And maybe one day when the organisation keeps growing, you might consider coming back. So I hate to lose great talented people, but sometimes in an organisation, you can't offer them that next step at the time they want it or need it, or deserve it potentially.
It's quite interesting because our conversation up to now talks a lot about the leader having to exert a lot of energy in energizing people and getting people to, be at their best. That takes a lot out of a leader.
Yeah, it does, and I'm a do as I do type person, not do as I say. I'm in a role, and you're in a role that you can ask people to do as I say, but for me, if I want you to extend yourself, if I want our culture to change, if I want us to be more contemporary, then I need to show I'm willing to exhibit those traits, that I'm willing to get onto Twitter, which I got called a twit at school, which I'm suggesting meant that I was a man of the future now.
Right, absolutely, that's right.
But I had to get onto Twitter. I had to do things that I thought were going to contemporise our brand. It's a lot easier to expect others to do something when you show them you're willing to do it yourself. I think I learnt that from my dad. He had a furniture factory, and I always would find him sanding the furniture with the apprentices. And as a boy, I thought the boss sat in a big office and didn't talk to anyone. But he taught me the principle of stand next to your people and show them what you'd like them to do, and the chances of them following you are much more enhanced.
So essentially your father was talking about leadership.
He was,
not about being a boss.
I didn't know at the time. But,
that there was a difference?
Well, just that thing. He also had this staff member who was really temperamental. And my dad didn't put up with temperamentality too well. And there was this one guy he kept putting up with. And even as a boy, I noticed that. And I thought it was really strange. And I remember asking him in the car on the way home, why do you put up with that? Like, you don't put up with that with your children or the other work. And he said, because this guy is particularly talented and I need him in the business. So there's a stretch range that I'm willing to deal with this guy because he's such an artist at what he does, and he's got some of the downsides of what a great artist might be like to live with, but I'll wear it because he's important to the business. So he taught me also that while you expect people to perform the same way, there will be people with different skills, there will be people that react differently. You've got to be able to deal and be flexible, and he'd never put up with rudeness, but if you needed a bit of latitude because you were a good performer, then he'd find a way to give it to you. And I think you've got to have that suppleness as a leader as well, to see people's talent and give them the space to perform, give them the space to empower them and trust them. They breach your trust, then you take action. But if they don't and they're growing, let them grow.
So where do you draw your strength from, Alex?
Look, I guess I draw my strength from being passionate about what I do and about seeing people grow in an environment where we work together. I really enjoy being first in the news on a topic and working with the team to work out how to make that happen. I enjoy building a culture in the workplace that gives people a sense that we can do something different. I'm very much a person that would rather beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. It would be hypocritical of me not to tell my staff that I don't mind that sometimes within reason. So I love people, I love teaching, and I guess the Naked CEO and everything about leadership for me is about being a teacher, about seeing you and saying, you know, you're very good at these things. I'm going to give you more opportunity to get even better at them, but I think you need to be better at that particular thing, so I need you to make an effort there. And I find that if I take the teacher perspective, it makes me a better leader. It works for me. And I love teaching, so I'm doing what I love, mate, and I want more people to be able to say that about their life, and they'll be surprised at how much more they can be productive and beneficial to others.
You're really a man of many talents, and I have to ask you this very hard question. You could transport all your skills into a huge organization today, earn a gazillion dollars, and help people at the same time, but you choose to stay at CPA Australia. What drives you to do that?
Well, you know, I could ask you the same question, because you have all these skills and you're not earning gazillions, you're with a regulator. Now,
That's a job offer for me, isn't it?
Yeah, but I guess we both do it because we love what we do. And I have never in my life chased money as part of an objective. Now, I've got to tell you, with 7 kids going to schools that cost a lot of money, there was a time where moonlighting and doing extra work when I was a teacher was a necessity. But I have never chased money. I've chased experience, I've chased fun, I've chased passion, and lucky enough, the combination of that has given me a good living and I'm not complaining. But I look at people who are earning high salaries, maybe in corporate setting. I look at the pressure they're under. I look at how restrained they are at speaking about issues in the public interest, issues about what's going on in politics. I don't want to be restrained. I don't want to be constrained. I don't think money's that valuable. And when you can be doing something you love, work with the people you love being with. I mean, I hug my staff, mate. A couple of my COOs will walk in, I haven't seen them for a week, I'll give them a hug. You know, to me, life's about living with people. And so I'm living with the people I want to live with. I'm doing the job I want to do. I'm paid okay and reasonably. I'm not complaining. I wouldn't swap that for any job with money.
That's
ever.
life, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
It is. And you want to be able to say that you have a great time at home, you have a great time at work, you love your family, obviously differently to love the people you work with, but it's about people. And on your deathbed, I think you look back at your life and say, you know, did I have some good relationships? Did I make a difference with some people? Did I learn some things? And I think you've got to live from the deathbed sometimes. You've got to think about, what would I think of me in 30 years' time, hopefully, when you're lying in a bed on your way to the next world.
Very good advice for everyone, because, you know, ultimately, passion drives you, and if you're just in it for the money, we found that in the long run, it doesn't quite work out.
Yeah. And in your industry, in your profession, as a regulator, unfortunately, you're out there looking for those gaps in the market and inappropriate behaviour. But in the end, the core of it always comes down to money, and always comes down to power. And if somehow you can teach young people that influence isn't about power, it's about how well you do something, and you teach them those principles early, the chances of us being a better society are much more profound. And at the core of it all is power and money. And if you can get that out of your mindset early, I think we're a better society for that.
You said just now, influence isn't about power. In the same vein, leadership isn't about titles. How do you encourage your staff to lead without a title?
Yeah, look, that's a good point. And you know, in your role, in my role, sometimes people treat you in a particular way because of your title, and it drives me crazy. I want people to talk to me like I'm Alex, not because I'm called the chief executive. So I've learnt this technique. When people talk to me, I listen to what's coming out of their mouth, but I also listen and look at their eyes. And if their eyes are inconsistent with their mouth, I believe their eyes. And that's something I've learnt to do in a leadership capacity. But look, I say to young people all the time, leadership's about every day of your life you can exhibit something. For example, you see someone who's suffering, you see someone who's in a bit of pain, being empathetic and asking someone on the street that you see, are you okay, is a leadership behaviour. Calling out behaviour that's wrong is a leadership behaviour. Expressing a message to someone in a clear way is a leadership behaviour. We've all got those traits, but we need to reshape them, and we need people like us who might be in roles we've been fortunate enough to be able to secure, to teach people the simplicities of leadership and authenticity. But if you're authentic, as a leader, it's nice to be popular, but not that important. It's nice to be respected, but not always does that happen. The one thing you want as a leader is to be believed. So you encourage in everyone, as I do, be yourself, be authentic. Tell people what you think. Tell the CEO in a polite way what you think. Now, you might get belted around the ears a couple of times, but you'll be respected because you're authentic. People believe you. And that's the core of a good life, I think.
Let's talk a bit about you personally. Do you recall a scene from a movie that really influenced you, changed the way you looked at things or conducted yourself? And how do you use that?
I don't know if it's because I'm 55 and my memory's hopeless, but I'll watch movies and feel moved for a moment and then forget them. But I can remember the original Rocky movie. And what I loved about it, and I think it's part of me in every fabric, is this underdog about never giving up, beating the odds. When I was able to interview Neil Armstrong, that was all about the odds. Everyone said it couldn't be done, so I wanted to do it. My mum was chronically ill with depression, and if anything or anyone gave me a context for life, it was her. And she would battle her way back from deep depression to being a great mum again. And then she'd hit the wall and she'd go down again, but she'd come back. So I guess my best lessons, and the ones that I remember most, are people who fight back, people who don't give in, who are resilient. And I look at the best people in the world that have had an impact, and they're the ones that have fought back. Because you learn something about yourself, Eugene, when you fight back. Because most people don't think they've got it in them, but they face a trauma and they get through it, and they're stronger for the experience. They might be a bit tougher, but they're stronger for the experience. And I don't wish people a trauma. I don't get up in the morning and say, well, I hope you have a trauma. But I know that if they do, and they work through that trauma, they'll be better shaped for life and better shaped to help someone else who will face a trauma. So fight backs, traumas, anything that's got a bit of depth to it, I'm normally the one who's crying in a movie. I cry in movies all the time, and it's very embarrassing on aeroplanes. Because every time I'm crying, they come up and ask me if I want a second course or I want something.
Was the food bad?
I know, and they think the food's bad because I'm crying. Very good.
I always think of life as a continuous journey. We learn from everyone we come into contact with. And certainly the younger generation has a lot to teach us, as much as we have to teach them. And that's something you've talked about as well. As a teacher, you learn from your students. What have you learned from your kids?
Another very good question. I think they teach you how much you can love someone. And you think philosophically you know how to love someone. You think you know how to lead, but you never know until you're in a situation. So you look at your children, you have your first child, and you look at this baby and you think, my God, I don't think I could love anything any more than that. And then a second child comes, and somehow there's space for the next one. So they teach you how to love, they teach you frustration when they get things wrong. They teach you how life's a cycle. So I'll see my kids make the very same mistakes I made, and part of the reason I wrote the book was to hope that some young kids might learn from my early mistakes. So it teaches you that you have stages in your life, and as your kids get older, you realise you're on a conveyor belt and you've got a different role in society to what you had when you were younger. So I'm very big on saying sometimes when you're young, it's normal to be a bit selfish. You're chasing your goals. I can't ask you not to do that, I understand. So you're going to be a bit selfish. But if you achieve some of those goals a little later on, I want you to be generous with the outcomes. I want you to let some other people in. And because more probably of my behaviour as a young person, I didn't get let into leadership situations very often. And I reflect on that and think it was mostly me, I guess. But now that I'm in a leadership role, as a parent and as a CEO, I'm very big on sharing my experiences, particularly my mistakes, because I look back at them and they're funny now, They were horrendous at the time. They were huge, but you know, mistakes make you stronger. And so you watch your kids go through the same cycle and you think, this is just life repeating itself. They even look like you and they're doing the same thing. So yeah, they're a wonderful reflection on what life's about.
So what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Coming back to leadership again, I'm just quite curious about, drawing strength to bring a team together and how you've done it. You know, we often come into situations where we have fairly dysfunctional teams, people who've just given up.
Yes.
And a lot of conflicts within the team. You have a team that's stuck. You've definitely come across situations like that. What would your advice be for any leader who's going into a new role?
I think it's really important to get as many diverse experiences as you can before you get that ultimate role that puts you in the top spot. And that's all about exposing yourself to a whole range of experiences. So find as many opportunities as you can to be in conflict situations. Don't create them, but if there's an issue going on in your workplace and your boss needs some support in a conflict situation, offer your help. Because I think it is, like everything in life, experience. The other thing that people respect from a leader is when they're comfortable in their own skin. I actually can't measure that as a formula, but whenever I'm with a person who's comfortable in themselves, they relax me. And so I think it's really important if you go into a leadership role to be relaxed, to be yourself, and to call out these behaviours in an open, human way. And I find humour is very helpful too. So if you see a situation and it's so tense, then sometimes a bit of humour can just break the ice. But you've got to be decisive. And if you've tried very hard to resolve the team's problem, but there's perhaps one person that's really at the core of it, then you've got to make a call on that person potentially, and you've got to make that decision perhaps to empower them to go somewhere else. But generally, if they believe you, if you're comfortable in your own skin, if you speak human rather than in language that no one understands, you can resolve those problems. But you've got to be persistent, you've got to expect this to take time, but if you can build a culture that's consistent and positive, it protects itself. Our organisation now has this culture that protects itself. If someone's errant in their behaviours in that department, the culture in that department will circle them and call that out. That's when you know you're at least got the momentum to go forward as a business.
Einstein once said that imagination is more important than knowledge. And if I circle back, early on you said that you're a person who would rather ask for forgiveness than to ask for beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. How would you advise people who have lots of imagination but may not have the right level of knowledge?
I really value imagination, and I talk about influence. So for example, someone can be a natural influencer because they've got a great mind, they've got a great imagination, they can see the future, but they've got no human maturity. And those people get themselves in all sorts of trouble because they raise issues that actually frighten people because they're right and they've got an instinct that's correct, but they don't have the maturity to manage it. So my advice to people who are highly imaginative, highly creative, and have a natural flair for seeing the future, learn how to mature your skills, learn how to deal with a range of people, practice on how to send a message, look for the reaction, learn about how people like to receive information. I have some staff who I have much better conversations with on the phone than I do in person. I have other staff who I have much better conversations in person than I do by phone. I try and remember how best to communicate with each person.
And some on email, I gather.
Some on email.
That's right.
Some by text. But it's really important that if you have an imagination, never to let it go. It's your best friend. I'm like a curious child, I still am. And when I get on long haul flights, when people say, how do you do all this travel? That's my creative time. That's when I sit there and dream about and imagine what we could do as a business or what we could do in a particular direction. And I don't claim to have a lot of knowledge, but I'm not bad at picking people that are smarter than me and have broader skills than me and bringing them together as a team. It's very important to hire people smarter than you, because if you're the one leading from the front all the time and no one else is confident enough to deal with you, you can get into the wrong direction. So you've got to have people that are smarter than you, that are testing you and challenging you, and you in your own way challenging them.
Alex, I'd just like to end by asking you to share one golden rule, the most important rule for all budding leaders.
To be authentic, to be yourself, and to, you know, if something's really tough, ask someone for their advice, and always remember you're human first and you're a work colleague second.
Well, Alex, thank you very much for joining us at Conversations at XC. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Eugene. It's been a pleasure.